When the stage lights dimmed that morning,
Well,
nobody
look at
seemed
you.
to notice the faint tremble in the air. But something inside me tightened as if my own heartbeat knew what my mind did not. Because there in the hazy glow of half-woken lamps sat Robin Williams, alone on the far edge of the soundstage, still in a way I had never seen him still before. And even though he hadn't yet lifted his head, even though he hadn't spoken a word, I felt a quiet warning settle deep in my bones, a whisper that this ordinary day would eventually become the final reel in a memory I would replay for the rest of my life. A day wrapped in mystery, warm light, fading laughter, and the kind of truth that only reveals itself when someone is already slipping into another room of existence, leaving their shadow behind like a gentle echo of who they once were. That morning in the early 2010s felt like any other workday in Los Angeles. The crew rushed across the set, adjusting cables, tweaking light angles, rolling out equipment, and yet, beneath all the noise, I sensed a strange softness surrounding Robin, as if he were wrapped in a veil only I could see. He lifted his head slightly, his eyes carrying a shimmer that didn't match the bright, comedic energy everyone expected of him. When our eyes met, he offered me a faint, crooked smile, small, almost apologetic, the kind that felt like an unspoken confession. I walked toward him with a coffee I hadn't even intended to grab, and he accepted it with gratitude so sincere it nearly startled me. "You ever wake up," he whispered, "feeling like the day already knows something you don't?" The question hung between us like a thin strand of fate, fragile yet heavy. I laughed lightly, not knowing what else to do, but his gaze didn't shift. It held a depth, a crackling kind of awareness, as though he was searching for a missing piece of himself in the reflection of my eyes. He motioned for me to sit beside him. Even with dozens of crew members bustling around us, it felt as though we had stepped into a quiet corner of time where the world slowed, just enough to hear the subtle tightening of someone's heart. Robin rotated the coffee cup between his hands, absorbing the warmth like it grounded him. His knee bounced in a restless rhythm, his gaze sometimes drifting toward the door, sometimes upward as if tracing memories in the rafters. And just when I thought I might ask him if he was all right, someone shouted his name from across the set, and in an instant he transformed, his back straightening, his face lighting up, his voice rising into a familiar comedic cadence. He leaped from the chair with exaggerated flourish, tossed out an accent so absurd half the crew burst into laughter, and for a moment the room glowed with his usual electricity. But even from behind, from the subtle stiffness in his shoulders, I could tell something inside him lagged a few steps behind the joy he was giving everyone else. For the next hour, he took command of the room like only he could, switching characters mid-set, improvising whole scenes out of thin air, filling every silence before it had a chance to settle. Yet between these bursts of brilliance, he would turn away, pressing his fingertips to his forehead, eyes narrowing as if trying to silence an ache. I saw it. Maria, our sound tech, noticed too. She nudged me once, whispering, "He seems, I don't know, tired." But Robin spun around at that exact moment, contorting his face into an expression so ridiculous she burst into a snort laugh that nearly toppled her over. That was his rhythm all day, patch every crack of concern with laughter, before anyone could fully look. But the moment that first shifted, the air came during lunch, when Robin slipped behind the soundstage instead of joining the others. Something inside me tugged instinct more than curiosity, and I followed him outside into the warm, muted light. He stood near an old metal storage container, the sun casting a soft halo around his silhouette. His shoulders were slouched in a way that made him look smaller, as though life had quietly folded him inward. Without turning, he asked, "You ever notice how the sky's never the same blue twice?" I told him I hadn't paid attention, and he hummed a soft, sad laugh. "Change is a strange companion," he said. "It shows up even when you're not ready to greet it." Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded paper, worn soft at the edges, the kind you could tell had lived in his pocket for years. He stared at it with tender pain, like a photograph of someone long gone. I didn't ask. Something told me not to. After a moment, he tucked it back, fingers lingering over his pocket, as if afraid the memory might slip away if he let go too quickly. We returned to set, but Robin drifted in and out of presence like a man walking between two worlds. One moment he was the brightest flame in the room, the next he was fading into a shadow only he could see. His smiles trembled, his eyes glazed, his chest rose in sharp breaths he tried to disguise behind humor. And just when the laughter peaked, he caught his reflection in the makeup mirror and froze, not with vanity, but with something like shock. as though he didn't fully recognize the man staring back. "Do you think," he whispered to me when no one else was close, "that people can feel when they're running out of time?" I had no answer. Before I could try, he shook it off with a goofy face, slipping into an over-the-top British butler impression that had the makeup artist crying with laughter. Yet beneath the chaos, he shot me a glance, one filled with apology, fear, and a quiet plea I couldn't decipher then. We wrapped the day after sunset. The air had cooled, the parking lot glowing faintly under buzzing halogen lamps. He asked me to walk with him, his voice carrying a softness I hadn't heard in him before. His footsteps were slow, his breath visible in the chill. "You're kind," he murmured. "Kindness feels rare these days." I tried to brush off the compliment, but he shook his head, eyes gentle. "Don't minimize it. People like you hold things together for the rest of us." The words settled into me with surprising weight, and before I could respond, he touched my arm lightly, so light it felt like a passing thought, and said, "People think laughter saves us, but it's the ones who listen who really keep us alive." Then came the moment that would follow me for years. He opened his car door, sat down, and paused. The interior light carved his expression into soft, trembling lines. "If you ever think back to today," he said quietly, "remember this. People don't disappear. They just..." His voice broke gently. He offered a final, weary smile. "Change rooms." And then he closed the door, leaving me standing under a flickering unsure why my chest ached as though I had just witnessed something irreversible. That was the last time I saw him alive. I didn't know then why my chest felt tight, or why his unfinished sentence echoed through me like a gentle alarm I couldn't interpret. But in the days that followed, I kept replaying the moment, the way he lingered before closing the door, the fragile smile, the weight in his eyes balanced between exhaustion and acceptance. I told myself he was just tired, that even the brightest stars dim sometimes. But some nights, I would lie awake sensing something I couldn't articulate, like a cold draft from a door left barely open. Over the next several weeks, he appeared on and off set, slipping through the doors with greetings that were always warm but increasingly fragile. Like his words were carried on thinning thread, he performed with astonishing brilliance each time, bright, sharp, magnetic, but between scenes his shoulders sagged, his gaze wandered, and his hands trembled when he believed no one noticed. I would catch him drifting off, staring at a wall or the floor, and when he snapped back to us, he covered the moment with a joke so quick and flawless, even those paying attention questioned whether they'd imagined the flicker of pain beneath the humor. There were days he seemed perfectly himself, radiant, mischievous, overflowing with compassion, and then afternoons where he moved like a man under heavy fog, each step careful, each breath measured, as if trying not to disturb whatever darkness pressed close around him. But the moment that carved itself deepest into my memory happened one ordinary afternoon when the lighting crew adjusted gels on the rafters and Robin sat alone at the edge of the set, shoulders slightly curved inward. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out that same folded piece of paper, the one worn down at the corners, softened from years of being handled. Only this time, with no one close enough to see but me, he unfolded it. I couldn't see the written message, but I saw the impressions, shadows of words pressed into the fibers from things written and erased again. The paper looked less like a note and more like a battlefield. His thumb brushed the lines gently, almost apologetically. When he noticed me watching, he folded it quickly and placed it back against his heart. The smile he offered wasn't a performance. It was small, weathered, and unbearably tender. "We all have things we're not done with yet," he said. And for the first time I heard not sadness in his voice, but resignation, steady, heartbreaking resignation. We wrapped early that day, and he looked relieved, genuinely relieved, as if the world had waited a long time to hand him even a few extra minutes of peace. As he packed his things, he paused beside me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Take care of yourself," he said. "Some people feel more than the rest of us. It's both a gift and a burden." The words hit me harder than they should have. Before I could respond, he started humming a tune, slow, haunting, familiar yet unplaceably, as he walked away. I didn't know then why that melody lodged itself so sharply into my memory. I didn't know I would hear it again only in echoes. Then came the morning. Everything changed. My phone buzzed with a notification while I was still half asleep, sunlight barely warming the blinds. When I opened the message, the world seemed to tilt. I remember sitting up to fast. I remember the sting of air in my lungs. I remember whispering, "No, over and over, as if repetition might change reality. The news didn't feel real. Robin Williams, our anchor of warmth, our generator of light, our quiet warrior, was gone. People used the word gone as if a soul politely slips out the back door, leaving the world gently, but it wasn't gentle. It was a rupture. It was the universe exhaling in grief. I sat in silence for a long time, unable to move, unable to accept that someone who had lifted so many could not lift himself that day. The studio fell into a hush. People walked with slow, unsure steps, voices lowered as though the air itself needed quiet to grieve. Flowers gathered at the soundstage gate like small offerings to a fallen giant. Crew members cried openly, big, burly men who'd spent their careers pretending nothing could crack them, and I found myself wandering through hallways that still held the fading echoes of Robin's laughter. I kept hearing him say, "We just change rooms," and the sentence broke me in ways I didn't understand yet. But the moment that finally shattered me came a few days later, when a small envelope arrived at the studio, with my name handwritten on the front. The handwriting was gentle, a little shaky, but unmistakably his. My hands trembled as I opened it, afraid the contents might undo me, and they did. Inside was the folded piece of paper, the same one he had guarded like a secret, the one softened from years of being opened and closed. I unfolded it carefully. The inked message was simple, written in the trembling handwriting of a man reaching for something beyond himself. "Thank you for seeing me." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. The room grew impossibly quiet, but when I turned the paper over, I noticed faint pencil marks on the back, so delicate they were almost invisible, like something written many times, erased, rewritten, erased again. I held it closer to the light. The sentence, barely there, read, "I wasn't alone that day." And beneath it, a date, the exact date of our conversation behind the soundstage, the moment he stared at the sky, the moment he asked if the world ever tried to whisper secrets. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't random. He had written the date long before he ever placed the paper in that envelope, as if he had known that moment would matter, as if he had sensed time bending around him, as if he understood something none of us did, that the smallest moments sometimes carry the greatest truths. For months afterward, I carried his voice inside me like a soft lantern. "We don't disappear. We just change rooms." On quiet nights, I whispered the words aloud, hoping to feel him near. And sometimes, especially at dusk, when the sky turns gold and the warmth of the day lingers like a memory, I truly did feel him. A presence hovering just past the edge of the visible world. A brush of comfort. A familiar warmth. A laugh carried on the wind. I keep that note in a drawer beside my bed now, folded in the same shape he kept it, edges worn, corners softened. A small relic of a soul too gentle for the storms he carried. When the world feels unbearably heavy, I take it out and let my fingers trace the paper's tired lines, imagining Robin stepping onto some new celestial stage, one without shadows, one where he is finally held with the gentleness he spent his life giving everyone else. And I imagine him humming that same quiet tune, looking back through an open doorway, smiling in that soft, crooked way, as if to say we were right there with him all along. Because some people don't vanish when they leave this world. They linger in the quiet places, in the spaces between breaths, in the stories we replay when the night grows still. They change rooms, and somehow through some tender mystery of the universe they leave the door open just enough for us to find them again someday. And if this story touched your heart in any way, I'd be grateful if you subscribed, left a comment, and gave the video a like. Your support truly means more than you know.